Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and welcome to this CSS tutorial on creating a horizontal menu. Now, in front of you, you can see the end result of this tutorial. So this is what we're going to be creating. So as you can see, we've got a nice color for the hover over here. And this tab here is actually part of the menu, but it's in a selected state. So essentially what we've got here is a darkened background. I've included just sort of a little logo up here and some content down here just to pad the page out. But we've got a white horizontal menu with a slightly thick black border at the bottom. And we've got a lighter black border at the top here, and then the selected state is just in black. So this is essentially what we're going to be creating, and it's actually easier than it might look to style out. One of the things is I've tested this code on all the latest browsers at the time of recording the tutorial. It works on Internet Explorer, Chrome, which I'm using to develop and test the code, and Firefox as well. So you should get a result for this. The only one problem with Internet Explorer and earlier versions of Firefox are the display for inline block. But there are hacks around that, so we'll be looking at that. But I mean, I'm using the latest version of Firefox, so it's not a problem. But then again, you're not going to assume that your users are using the latest version either. So I'm going to create it as it is now. But obviously, if you want to go ahead and support older browsers, you can go ahead and look up how to do so. Okay, so this is the end result. So let's go ahead to our blank canvas, if you like, and start writing the code out. Okay, so we're over to our text editor. We've got very little markup. We've just got our standard page just out here. We've linked to a style sheet, which is our primary.css style sheet, and there's nothing in there at the moment. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building up the markup first and looking at how this looks when it's just plain on a page and we haven't rendered any CSS, and then we're going to be creating the CSS just to build it up and start to make it look like an actual menu. So let's go ahead and start to create our page. Now I've chosen to create an overall container, and this is just going to make it look a bit better because we're going to have our menu span the width of whatever's containing it. So let's go ahead and create a container here. So I'm going to say div id equals something. I'll pull that down. The ID for this is going to be container. We're going to be styling the container, but we're not going to go into that too much. We'll just be giving it a specific width and then floating it in the middle of the page. So inside of our container, what do we want? Well, we had our header, so I'm going to go ahead and create a header with my h1 tags. So I'll just type in PHP Academy in there. The menu is going to go here. I'm not going to do that just yet. We'll just go down and create a paragraph here, and I'll say some website content here. Okay, so let's go ahead and style our container up just so we get the general idea. We've got these here just sort of floating around, doing not much. Let's just go over to primary.css and style our container. We can get that out of the way and done with, and then we can concentrate on talking about the code for the menu. So the container is going to have a specific width. I'm going to set this to 960 pixels, and I'm going to create a margin of 0 auto. So this is just going to create a left and right margin of auto, and that will then end up floating in the middle of the page. I'll go ahead and set a background for the body as well. That's probably important so we can start to see our menu, because we're going to give the menu a background of white, so we need to be able to see it. So let's go ahead and give the body a background of, we'll say, E0, 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 and that will give it a nice subtle grey colour. You can see that that's just changed. Okay, so we've done that now. We want to go ahead and start writing the markup for our menu. So for the menu, we're going to be using an unordered list, which is the way to do it. It's semantically correct to do an unordered list, because a piece of software such as a screen reader might go through a list, especially if it had, say, nav tags around it or something like that. It would pick up that it was a menu. You might never have written a menu using UL before, but the benefits to it obviously outweigh the negatives. I can't think of any negatives. So we're going to be using an unordered list, which might seem odd because it's just a list that goes from top to bottom with bullet points, but we'll look at removing them and styling the menu up as we would. So let's go ahead and create our unordered list tags. And obviously in between we need our list items, so we'll go ahead and just create one for now, and then we'll duplicate this down and change some of the content like home, about us, etc. So inside of here we're going to want an anchor tag, an A tag, so let's go ahead and create that. And in here I'm just going to pop a hash in because I'm not going to have it linked through to anything, it's unnecessary. We're not looking at that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to type in home here. Okay, so I'm just going to duplicate that down a few times, so we'll say sort of 6 times, and we'll go ahead and we'll put some content in here. So I'll say contact, if I can type contact us, about us, forum, and we'll just say login and register. Doesn't really matter as long as we sort of pan it out a bit, and then at least we can see the overall menu filled up with some nice content. Okay, so let's go over to our browser, hit refresh, and you see that we've got a list that looks like this. So like I said, it's a list from top to bottom. They're underneath each other. These elements are underneath each other. They've got bullet points. We've got that ugly blue color as the default anchor tag color, or the anchor or the link color. So at the moment it's not looking very nice, but the way we've written our markup, we've got our header just nicely at the top, we've got our menu here, and we've got our content here, so everything looks in order. Nothing's nothing seems out of place. But then when we style it up, obviously the styling is completely separate from the markup, so we can actually create something that looks really nice, but it still be in the right order, if you like, or maintain its semantic ways about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to style this up. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give an identifier to this menu. We could give it a class, I suppose. I guess a class would be easier because we might want to use this elsewhere. So I'm going to give it a class of just menu, quite boring, but this is how we're going to identify it. Now we don't need any other classes in here, except eventually we'll need class selected. So class selected is going to mean that the tab color is black, which means that it's selected. Now obviously we can't determine which page is selected using CSS. This would have to be something that would be put in the background, maybe as your page is rendered by a server, whichever programming language you decide to use on your server to create your website. Or it can be done with JavaScript. So either way, I'm not going to go into that in the tutorial, but we will be styling up this class to create the effect of the tab, but we're obviously not going to be going into actually looking at how we create that or how we insert that in. So I'm going to leave it out for now. We'll style up the menu itself, then we'll go ahead and do the tab. So down here, what do we want to do? Well, the first thing I want to go ahead and do is I'm just going to style up the font for the header, which I'm going to then create the same font for the menu as well. So we'll say H1, and I'm going to say font 2EM and Georgia. Now I'm not providing a backup. I'm not going to go into that in this tutorial. The font doesn't really matter. There is a font video in this series if you haven't already watched it, but I'm just going to provide Georgia just because it's easy, quick, and we can get past that straight away. Okay, so let's go ahead and style up our menu. So menu, remember we're using a class, so we use a dot for a class. Let's go ahead and set the overall font for the menu. So I'm going to set it to 1EM and then Georgia. So again, I'm not doing that properly. Text transform is an important one. We want to basically make everything uppercase. In fact, we'll leave that out for now. We'll go for the important things first, like list style. None. Now, list style will tell us which list style the list, because remember it is still a list. We want the list to take. And when I've chosen none, you can see, well, first of all, the font's changed, but second of all, these bullet points have changed, which is great because we don't want to actually display them. They're something that the browser does by default. Now, what else do we want to do? Well, we wanted to, let me just go back to the thing. You can see that we've got this padding and margin around it, or it's just a margin, I think. Let's right click and inspect. So I'm using the element inspector. You can see that we've got a margin on the left hand side and we've got padding on the top of this. So the orange that you can see is the padding and the green on the left hand side is the margin. So we want to go ahead and get rid of this. So we can say padding 0 and we can say margin 0 as well. So that will just refresh and that just goes back to there. Okay, so now what do we want to do? Well, we want to go ahead and float these. Well, we're not going to use float, we're going to display inline. We want these to display in a long line, obviously, because we're creating a horizontal menu. So how do we go about doing this? Well, we need a different selector. We're not going to select the overall menu, but we're going to select the list items within the menu. So we say menu li, so we're saying any li element within menu, which is, remember, a ul. So if you had a nav, you'd say nav ul li, but we're just targeting menu because menu itself is a ul, an unordered list. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, we want to display inline block. Now the reason we want to display inline block is because if we just display inline, it's going to be slightly harder for us to style. Inline block behaves like a block element, so it behaves like a div, an image, anything that you'd be able to just say, yeah, give this a width, a height, a background color. I mean, you can do that with inline elements, but still, it just makes it a lot easier for us to style. The only downside to this is it's at the time of recording this tutorial, it's not massively supported. Firefox in the latest version, or probably a couple of versions back, I'm not sure when it was introduced, does support this. Chrome supports it well. Safari, I believe, supports it well. It's WebKit. However, Internet Explorer doesn't. So we're going to need to do a couple of things to get around this. Now, I'm not going to go over it too much detail. I'm not going to actually even load it up in Internet Explorer. I'll leave that to you for you to do, because it's something you should always do when you're creating CSS, testing all browsers. But we'll go through the hack in just a moment. Okay, so we've done that. Let's take a look at the result of this display inline block property and see what it's done. Let's go ahead and refresh, and you can see that that's put it all in a line. So it's starting to come together already. We've got it in a line. We've removed the default styling, and it's looking good. So in the next part of the tutorial, we're going to start to actually add some color to this and some padding, and just make it look a bit nicer, and get it how we need it to look. So that will be in the second part.